Happy Halloween! Today I want to discuss an underrated movie series that gets tons of shit, and though much of it is justly deserved, both are good movies. Let's explore Rob Zombie's version of John Carpenter and Deborah Hill's Halloween 1 and 2, and spoiler for those of you out there who have not seen the movies. Personally, I prefer Part 2 to Part 1, so we won't explore Part 1 as much, especially since we already know the story of Michael Myers. That being said, here's a list of what I did and didn't like about Part 1. Didn't like: the stepfather. William Forsythe plays the part of Ronnie White, the man dating Michael's mother, Deborah. The character was a straight-up asshole, and Forsythe's incredible acting skill oversold it for me. He came across as so awful that I practically was begging Michael to kill him so I wouldn't have to hear his annoying character anymore. So if anyone I dated ever told my son they'd break his face, I'd kick his ass right out of my house. I mean, how the fuck could Deborah ever let a piece of shit like that around her kid? The motive. So in Zombie's mind, what created Michael Myers was a combination of his mother's stripping, abusive boyfriend, absent or deceased father, and self-absorbed sister. Before Michael killed Ronnie, he was just eating candy corn at the kitchen table after he had to go trick-or-treating alone. Then he suddenly puts on the mask, gets a knife, and duct tapes Ronnie to the chair of death, leading to his night of murder. I just don't buy that and expected something more from Zombie. The movie released in 2007, and I remember Zombie doing promos for it. He said the movie would explain why Michael Myers was a murderer, something the original movie left unknown. But the reason he gave was totally lame. The allure with Michael is we don't know what makes him tick. And that's the mystery that's best left unsaid. Dr. Loomis. This iconic character is played by Malcolm McDowell and is completely different than the one Donald Pleasence portrayed. This is one greedy, egotistical man, and he gives up on Michael to pursue financial gain. In the original series, Dr. Loomis was always the first one to help or look for Michael, and now he's an egotistical putz. I know Zombie was going for different, but why was every single person in this movie an asshole? The kids in Michael's school, assholes. His sister and Ronnie, assholes. The nurses in the asylum, assholes. The raping orderlies, assholes. Strangers on the street, assholes. The assholery in this movie is astronomical and just completely unnecessary. The rape. In this movie, there is a rape. As a woman and a person with a soul, I don't find that entertaining. There is gratuitous porn and nudity in the movie, and I get the director wanting to show the gritty side of life for people, but it wasn't necessary and didn't make sense to the story, and it honestly should have been left out. What I did like: the violence. During the murder scenes, it was violent and bloody, the way murders happen. When Michael kills his victims in Zombies movies, you can hear the knife entering the bodies, even Michael himself breathing hard from the act of killing. It's almost as if you can feel the brutality, like you're in the room with it. When Annie is crying on the ground after Michael stabbed her, her half-naked body is brutally real and creepily similar to what you'd see at a crime scene. Deborah Myers. Played by Zombie's wife, Sherry, Deborah was on my like list. I do like Sherry Moon Zombie. She has a sweet face and persona, and not to mention she's gorgeous. As Deborah, she was sensitive, kind, loving, yet tormented by what her son did and what he was evolving into that drove her to suicide. It kind of came out of nowhere for me, but then again, isn't that what suicide does to the people who are left behind? I think it was sick she did it in the room with her baby and left no one behind to care for her. However, it was just a sad example of how alone Deborah had become. There was no one to help her, and I'm sure no one in the town wanted to help her either. No matter how much time passed, tantrums Michael had, or people he had killed, she genuinely seemed to want to be there to help him. It was incredibly sad viewing her pain as she was watching past home movies of her and what she thought was her happy family that no longer existed. Leslie Easterbrook from the Police Academy movies, and there's Captain Spaulding, twice. This movie had some great cameos from some great actors. Laurie Strode. Scout Taylor Compton was pretty okay as our innocent Laurie. It's pretty cute to see how Scout tries to take on Jamie Lee's infamous character, and I believe Jamie Lee is better than Scout at Laurie's character, but that doesn't mean that Scout is horrible. The young woman brings an interesting take to a new, not-so-innocent Laurie Strode, which carries into the sequel and just blossoms. Danielle Harris returns to the series, not as Laurie's child, but as her best friend, Annie Brackett. Michael Myers. Dag Ferch plays young Michael Myers for the first movie, and he's pretty damn great. He's a cute boy with eerie, creepy tendencies. He did amazing as the young slasher, and Zombie did a pretty decent job showing us Michael's descent into madness rather than his motive. Taylor Maine plays the older Michael, and I love how tall, foreboding, and intimidating he was as our killer. He's big and scary as fuck, especially when he forces himself effortlessly through a door or a window, and he commands fear, especially when he wears that mask. Now, oddly, despite killing his older sister Judith, the only love this man carries is for his mother and his baby sister. Sheriff Brackett. Brad Dourif is Sheriff Brackett, and I'm honored to be laying my eyes on this man in this movie. Everyone knows him as the voice of Chucky from the Chucky series, and he's a marvelous actor with an extensive resume. I love that Zombie gave the sheriff a life for the viewer to connect with, which was absent from the original movies. The tone and colors. Unlike the sequel, this movie is filled with color, flowers, laughter, and hope. Nothing terrible has taken place for Laurie and her friends, maybe even Deborah Myers, until Michael came in and literally tore their lives apart. There's something about this movie with colors and symbolizing all of their lives before Michael. It isn't until the end when he so-called kills Dr. Loomis. I guess, honestly, that Rob Zombie wasn't planning on a sequel at that point, and the color starts to leave the picture. The sequel is absent of bright or positive colors, which represents the lasting impression Michael left on their lives. Again, this one wasn't as good as part 2, but it had fantastic moments. Actors, development, realism in the violence and the blood. The beginning was slow since it tried to explain Michael's evolution into a killer, and it didn't leave a lot of room for the killing when Laurie was reintroduced back into the story. But when the killing started, it started. Ultimately, the story of a little boy with such a sweet smile, who could be anyone's child, turned into a sadistic killer and ruined the lives of countless people. It's tragic and it's seriously chilling. Rob Zombie's spin on Michael is unintendedly depressing, but it gave the movie the violent touch the original lacked. The only thing is, I didn't like the motive given for Michael's murder, and maybe we're better off not knowing what makes this guy tick. Now let's move on to part 2 of Rob Zombie's Halloween. As I previously stated, this one lacks color, is much more violent, and more psychological than what's typically found in a Halloween movie. The story begins with Laurie dreaming Michael breaks into the hospital right after she shoots him in the head at the end of part 1. He ultimately kills every single person in the hospital to get to her. Michael's reign of murder is downright brutal, right down to hearing him scream as he stabs the people to death. The end events of the previous movie don't carry through since Zombie ended the first one without the desire to create a sequel. Dr. Loomis is miraculously alive and with his peepers, and Laurie's injuries are significantly worse. In reality, though, she's not dreaming. It's 2 years later, and Laurie is mentally destroyed. She now lives with Sheriff Brackett and Annie, who is still alive and taking the whole being a victim of a serial killer on Halloween way much better than Laurie. Michael is alive, surviving the grazed bullet and a car wreck, and is on his way back to Laurie with the goal of making his family whole. His mother, Deborah, reprised by Sherry Moon Zombie, tells Michael she isn't really there and all part of his mind. One thing I notice about our favorite killer is when he doesn't wear the mask, things seem fine. But when Michael puts that mask on, shit gets real. Life has drastically changed for Laurie as she's no longer a sweet high school girl molesting bagels and babysitting on the weekends. She's a young, traumatized adult on heavy medication and doing a piss-poor job of holding on to people in her life while trying to deal with the loss of her family and friends. It's as if we're getting a true glimpse of Laurie post-Halloween Part 1. It wouldn't be rainbows, hot boobs, and Jamie Lee Curtis. Though, that would be nice. Many people in reality have survived much worse than Laurie, and it utterly destroys their psyche. When we see survivors on television talking about how they continue to survive even after the event, we don't see them in their darkest moments, when the doors are closed and their demons come out to play. In Rob Zombie's Halloween Part 2, we do. Laurie has a few new friends in her life, and she's struggling to find a safe place, mentally. In the days leading up to Halloween, we see her go from a girl who's trying to keep it together, but the closer Halloween draws, the more unhinged she becomes. Laurie's mind mentally connects with Michael's on many occasions leading up to these days, almost as if their minds are trying to merge. As Halloween and Michael closes in on Laurie, her emotions stretch to a breaking point. It's Halloween when Dr. Loomis's book comes out, naming Laurie as Angel Myers, sister to Michael. I must say, she took it pretty well. Just kidding. She fucking mentally fell off the cliff of sanity, plunging face first into one of the coolest Halloween parties I've ever seen. So at least she was having a good time while in such emotional turmoil. I'm so sorry to tell you guys that Dr. Loomis's character doesn't get any better in the sequel, separating him further from one of the characters Donald Pleasance is best known for. I'm serious, there's not one redeeming quality about his character. Not one single thing. At the end, Michael finally catches Laurie and takes her to an abandoned shack where she sees Deborah and younger Michael, the same ones that Michael has been seeing in his head. We do kind of finally understand that Laurie has mentally synced with Michael, and their minds are basically now one. Dr. Loomis does try to do the right thing and rescue Laurie, but Michael's pretty pissed at him for making tons of money off of his family's misery and murder. And I'm not sure if I liked it when Michael spoke for the first time and only time as an adult to tell Dr. Loomis to, quote, die. Because it was a huge risk for Zombie. Some think that, of course, it was a mistake to give Michael words, but I do think it paid off. If I remember correctly, Dr. Loomis was the last person Michael spoke to before he went silent as a child. Now he's the last person Michael speaks to again, but this time they both die. At least that's what the movie leads us to believe. The ambiguous ending had us wondering if Laurie died or is in purgatory as she sits in what looks like a mental asylum, a really fucking creepy smile spread across her face as she sees her mother and a big white horse, though some do believe that she just went straight to an asylum. But I think it was more ambiguous than that, because I just honestly think that Zombie didn't really want to end it on a final note. He wanted to give us something more of a guessing ending. I know critics hated Zombie's rendition of Halloween, and they hated the second one even more. I say fuck those critics. In the end, Part 2 was a nice little violent piece of work that's great to watch when you're alone and it's thundering outside. Rob Zombie brought a new, fresh take to the franchise and took risks that mostly paid off in the sequel. Both films are dark as fuck, and John Carpenter himself approved Zombie for the remake. He gave it his all for the first one, swore he'd never make a sequel, made a sequel, swore he'd never make a third, and then a third movie got lost in pre-production. Rob Zombie himself did say that he doesn't like the Halloween films that he made, but prefers the sequel to the first one. But save for the recent Halloween movie that was just released in theaters, Zombie's the only person to take on the Halloween series and kept it alive. Otherwise, it would have died long time ago with Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, and all those other remakes that just sucked so terribly. I mean, I'm serious, guys. They sucked so terribly. They extinguished the franchise forever. The Chucky movies aren't bad, but they're not great either. Pretty much every single slasher from the 70s and 80s burned out, and I appreciate Zombie for what he tried to do, especially for bringing the much-needed violence to his remake. Now, I'm sure they'll show these two gems on television tonight, so do yourself a favor, and if you haven't watched it, grab some candy. It'll be free right outside your door tonight only. And watch these two films and judge it for yourself. Thank you so much for watching, and have a safe and fun Halloween. And of course, beware of sexy scathach out there.